Begin today the Gemara and Daf Kuf Chavav Amud Beis, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. The Gemara here begins a new subject, but it's related to what we're talking about over here, which is the Yerusha of a Bukhar that gets a double portion. Amar Rabami said, Tumtum shenikra v'nimtze zachar. Person that's born as a tumtum, which is someone that you cannot see the signs of whether he's a zachar, a male, or a nekeva, or a female. And then later, his body is opened up, and now you can see. It turns out that he's actually a zachar. Even after that's determined, he still does not get a double portion. The Makra, because the pasuk when it speaks about the Bechor getting pishnayim, the pasuk says V'hoya haben abchor lasniya. And if the wife, the person that he hates, has the firstborn son to him, he gets a double portion. So because it says the term V'hoya, we learn from this Achi yehei ben mishas havaya. Only if you see that he's a son, that he's a zachar, from the moment he comes into existence. When he's born, then he gets a double portion. But if it's only determined later on, after he's born, then it's too late. He doesn't get. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, another halacha, we can say similar. Af, ein nidin keben seirer u'meire. A child like this, the halacha of a ben seirer u'meire will not apply to him. The ben seirer u'meire is someone that's rebellious, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin says these specific conditions of how he has to rebel in order for him to fall into this category, and the halachas of what's done with him. So this halacha of ben seirer u'meire will not apply to him, because the makra there's a similar lashon. The pasuk says ki yiyeh leish ben seirer u'meire, so it begins with the words ki yiyeh. What does that mean? Achi yehei ben mishas havaya. Only if he's a ben seirer u'meire, if he's a son, if he's a zachar, from the moment that he's born. Ameimer says, Af eina memayit chelik b'chayra. This child that was a tumtum in the beginning, he will not minimize the portion of the b'chayra. Shenemar, the pasuk says, v'yolda loy banim, that he gave birth to other sons, meaning after there's a b'chayr, he gave birth to other sons. What does this mean? Achi yehei ben b'shas leida. If it's a son from the time that he's born, then I say that this son will minimize the chelik of the b'chayra. Now, what does this mean? Memayit chelik b'chayra. So the Rashbam over here explains that this son that in the beginning was born as a tumtum, and now you see that he's a zachar, he gets a portion of an inheritance from his father, just like any other son. The fact that they found out later on that he's a son doesn't take away from his ability to be a son and to get a regular portion of the inheritance. However, because they only found out later that he's a son, regarding the Bechor, when they come to give the Bechor the double portion, we count out that son as if he doesn't exist, in order for him not to minimize the chelik of the Bechor, the double portion that the Bechor would get. The example that Rashbam uses is, for let's say you have 3 sons. One is a Bechor, one is a plain son that was a Zachar right when he was born, and the third one is this Tumtum. And let's say there's $900 here to divide. So when you're coming to divide the double portion for the Bechor, so you give right away the Bechor a double portion as if there's only 2 sons here. And if there's only 2 sons here, so then from the $900, you're going to have to give the son a double portion, extra $300. That extra $300 that he gets is because you're ignoring the third son of the Tumtum that's here. After he gets that $300, now the remainder, $600, and now you want to divide the Yerusha, the inheritance, the regular part of the inheritance, not the Bechayra. Here you divide the remainder of the $600 between the 3 sons. And then each son will get $200. So regarding the regular portion of Nachla, this son is considered to be a Zachar, but regarding the double portion of the Bechor, we ignore this son, which is a Tumtum. That's what it's saying. That's what it means. V'yolda loy banim, that the other sons that are born, it has to be that from birth we know he's a Ben, in order for him to affect the double portion of the Bechor. Another halacha, similar, that we learn out from the Psukim, Rav Sheizvi Amar, Rav Sheizvi says that, or the Bachir switches the names of the Girs. Okay, let's see what it says in the Gemara. Rav Sheizvi Amar, Rav Sheizvi says, Af einen nimel l'shmeina. A child that was born in the beginning of Tumtum, and later his body opened up and we saw that he's a Zachar, and now he has to have a bris. He cannot have his bris on the 8th day, and that is if it falls out on the Shabbos. And Mila is Doiche Shabbos, but not if it's a Tumtum. The Amakra, the pasuk says, Isha ki sazriya v'yolda zachar u'b'yoyim hashmini yima. And then on the 8th day, you make the bris. It's from this pasuk that the Gemara learns out in Shabbos, u'b'yoyim hashmini, that b'yoyim hashmini means that you do the bris even on a Shabbos. But because it says here, v'yolda zachar, from this we learn, achiyeh zachar mishas leida. When does the bris on the 8th day push off Shabbos? Only if it's a child that's a zachar from the time of birth, not if he's a tumtum. Another halacha similar that we could learn out from this expression of leida, Rav Shravia Amar, Rav Shravia says, af ein imoi tmeya leida. The mother, the tumah of leida that applies by birth will not apply to this child, because over there in the pasuk where it speaks about the same parsha of Tazria, when it speaks about the tumah of leida that applies to the mother when she gives birth, the Hamakra isha kisazria v'yalda zachar, and then it says v'toma shivas yamim, that if she gives birth to a zachar, then her tumah is for 7 days. So because it says v'yalda here, achi hey zachar mishas leida, that the tumah of the birth of a zachar only applies if from birth this is a zachar, not if later we find out that he's a zachar. The Gemara here brings this example of the tumah of the zachar, which is for 1 week, and by a nekeva, a woman that gives birth to a nekeva, the tumah is for 2 weeks. And the same thing over there. The tumah of 1 week for the zachar, or the tumah of the mother for 2 weeks for the nekeva, will not apply by this birth, because from the time of birth we didn't know whether he was a zachar or a nekeva, and the pasuk uses the term v'yolda. This halacha of tumah that the pasuk speaks about over here regarding birth is the halacha of tumah regarding a mother when she gives birth, minatayra. Midrabanan, this is the different halacha that we apply today. The halacha of birth is that any time there's any blood, there's a tumah that's not this tumah that the Torah speaks about over here. This is the tumah that there is mitzad the birth itself, that the Torah says that 1 week for a zachar and 2 weeks for a nekeva. That's what the Gemara is talking about. That tumah minatayra will not apply. So the Gemara asks on this, Meisvei, we learned on this last halacha here, that from Rav Shravia. So we learned in Masechta Nida, in a Braise, Hamat Peles, Tumtum Vadreigenes, a woman that miscarries. And she either gave birth to a tumtum, that we were discussing, that you can't see whether it's a zachar or a nekeva because it's covered, or vandreigenes. And andreigenes is someone that has both signs of being a zachar and a nekeva. So what's the halacha in this case? Teishev, lezachar, or nekeva. So here she has a tumah of both like a zachar and like a nekeva. So here we see that the tumah does apply. We're not going to darshan the word v'yolda to say that the tumah does not apply. No, the tumah does apply. Says the Gemara, to yufte the Rav Shravia. This refutes what Rav Shravia said, that we darshan this term leida to say that it has to be a zachar or a nekeva from birth. To yufte. Yeah, so this actually refutes his opinion. Okay, so the Gemara says based on this, we basically refuted this drasha of the word v'yolda. Rav Shravia based his halacha that there's no tumah by birth for a tumtum because of the term v'yolda. If so, lemet have it to yufta the Rav Shezvi. We should also say that this refutes what Rav Shezvi said. Why? Because Rav Shezvi darshan from the same word v'yolda regarding the bris on the 8th day. That v'yolda, we can't make the bris on Shabbos because it has to be dafka born as zachar. So if we're refuting what Rav Shravia said regarding the term v'yolda, we should refute what Rav Shezvi says from the drasha of the word v'yolda. Says the Gemara, no, it's not necessarily going to refute what Rav Shezvi said. Why? Because I can say, Tane sfuki misapkele. The Tane here that says that the tumah will apply by birth, and if it's a tumtum and an adreigenis, so you have to be machmer that the tumah should be for zachar and nekeva. Why is he saying this? Because he actually has a suffix, how to darshan the pasuk. When it says that term v'yolda, should you darshan to say that v'yolda means that only if it's clear at the time of birth that it's a zachar and a nekeva, the tumah applies, and if not, there is no tumah? Or maybe we don't darshan v'yolda that way. Maybe there's a different drasha for v'yolda. And even if it's a tumtum and adreigenis, there is tumah. So the Tana had a suffix, so because he had a suffix, so he's machmer. He says that the mother, the tumah will apply like a zachar and a nekeva. So therefore we're machmer. So therefore, this will not contradict what Rav Shezvi said, because when Rav Shezvi said that a child that's born a tumtum and you can't give him a bris, the reason why Rav Shezvi was saying this, he was saying also l'chumre, that you can't push off Shabbos because it's unclear if we darshan the v'yolda to say that you don't make a bris on Shabbos if it's born a tumtum, or maybe we don't darshan. but because it's a suffix, so therefore we have to be machmer. So therefore it does not refute what Rav Shezvi said. But what Rav Shravia said, though, it does refute, because Rav Shravia said lekula. Rav Shravia came to say that in a case where the child is born a tumtum, we're makel that the tumah of the mother does not apply. So if it's only a suffix and you have to be machmer, so then how would the Rav Shravia say that you're makel? So therefore it only refutes what Rav Shravia said. So the Gemara asks on this, now if this is the case though, and you're saying that this whole thing here is a suffix, Ihachi teishev l'zachar ulenekeva ulenida. If so, the halacha should be this Mishnah or this Braisa that we quoted from Nida, that says that this matpeles, that she miscarried a tumtum or an androgynous. So it says that you have to be machmer. This is the way we're understanding this. This whole thing is a suffix, and you have to be machmer that there's tumah. So what does it say? The chumrah of the tumah is both for a zachar and for an nekeva, but it should mention something else as well. It should say ihachi teishev lezachar ulenekeva ulenida mibayele. It should also add that you have to be machmer that the halacha of the tumah of a nida should apply over here. What's the Gemara's question? The halacha by a woman that gives birth, and this is also you see there in the psukim, it says that by, as mentioned, by a zachar there's a tumah for the first week, by a nekeva there's a tumah for 2 weeks, but then there's something else. That's what's called yimei toihar. By a zachar, until 40 days, any blood that the mother sees after that week, from after the week until the end of 40 days, which comes out to be, let's say, 36 days. So for those 36 days, any blood that the mother sees, minatayra, she's toher. And by a nekeva, any blood that you see up until 80 days will be toher. For a period of 80 days. It's called Yemei Toihar, the days of Tara. And she will not become a nida in those days. So, which means when you give birth, there's a tumah that applies, but there's also tara that applies. There's a chumrah and there's a kula. So, if this braisa, according to what we just explained, has really a suffix about this, that when you give birth, should I say that the halachas of these psukim here apply? Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I darshan v'yolda to say that what it says here in this parasha does not apply. If so, the braisa should have said that we have to be machmer, that she does not have those yemei toihar, those days where usually when a woman that gives birth up until 40 days or 80 days, she has that the Yemei Tara should not apply and she should become Tameh as a Nida. The Braisa should have added the word Nida to say as well that we're Machmer, because the whole thing is a suffix. Why didn't it say this point as well? On this the Gemara says, Kashya, this why the Braisa, if it's Taka or suffix as we said, why the Braisa does not mention the suffix of Nida, that remains a question. And the Rashbam says that the Gemara does not say to Yufta on this, because we could say that the Braisa left out the word Nida, and really you have to be guided as the word Nida. It's not this. The Gemara doesn't consider this to be a refutation for the answer that we gave before. There's a long discussion here in the Rashbam. He quotes from the Gemara in Nida. I'm not going to get into this, but he explains why the Braisa had to mention the word Lezachar. The word, when it says here Teishev Lezachar Ulenekeva, the word Lezachar seems to be extra, because once we're saying that we're machmer for this woman, that the first 2 weeks from after birth should be considered Tameh. What's the relevance of mentioning Zachar? That for a week she's considered to be Tameh. Already 2 weeks we're considering her to be Tameh. And if we're saying that we're machmer, that she sees blood after those 2 weeks, that we have to be machmer, that she should be a nida, and the yemei toihar, the days of purity, do not apply, so then there's nothing missing. The Braisa could have just simply said lenekeva elenida. The lezachar seems to be extra. So the Gemara in Nida makes a whole cheshbon to explain exactly what that word lezachar comes to add. The Rashbam quotes it here. It's a cheshbon, but it's not. I'm not going to get him mamsh to the pshat of the Gemara. Okay, let's go weiter here. Zok the Gemara, Omar Rav said, Tanya kvasei de Rav Ami. I learned in the Braisa, like what Rav Ami said, going back to the point that we started off with regarding the Bechor, that a Bechor that was born a tumtum does not get a double portion. So the Braisa says, Ben, when it says in the Torah that V'yolda Ben Zachar, so it's because it says Ben, that means, what's the lashon of the pasuk over there that he's quoting? It says V'hoya habena b'chor lasaniya. So that lashon of ben means v'loy tumtum. He has to be clear as a ben, as a zachar from the time of birth, and not a tumtum. Now, when it says b'chor, when the pasuk says that he's a b'chor, this means b'chor v'loy safik, a b'chor and not a safik b'chor. Okay, so the Gemara will explain now this second drasha. Says the Gemara bishleime ben v'loy tumtum. What does it mean when we say that in order for him to get a double portion, he has to be a ben from birth and not a tumtum? We understand what that means. Keda Rab Ami. It's coming to say the point that Rab Ami said that if he's born a tumtum, even if later it was determined that he's a zachar, he will not get a double portion. Elo b'chayr v'lo safek, when it says that he has to be a b'chayr and not someone that there's a doubt about his status, la fukimai. What is that coming to exclude? If we're talking about a person that we don't know what his status is, a person walks into a city and says, I am a b'chayr, and we have no clue whether he's a b'chayr or not. It's a doubt. So the fact that he would have to prove that he's a b'chayr is obvious. He wants to come and take from his brothers a second portion. He's going to have to prove it. We don't need a pasuk to teach this to me. So what exactly is the pasuk saying here? Says the Gemara, la'afuke mid'darash Rava. What this drasha here in this brayse is saying, it's excluding from a halacha that Rava said. The darash Rava taught a halacha as follows: Shtei noshim sheyoldu beis charem b'machpa. What happens if you have two wives of a person that gave birth to two boys, but they gave birth somewhere in a dark place, in a cave, let's say. And now what happened is, it's not clear which one was born first. The b'chayr, to get the double portion, has to be the b'chayr to the father. But you don't know which one of these wives gave birth first to the zachar. So now, later on in life, when the father passes away, and now there's a suffix, which one of them is the b'chayr, so none of them can come and say, give me a double portion. So what do? So Rava said, let each one write to the other a document, sort of a permission slip, giving the other one permission, you could collect the double portion for me. You're taking my place, I give you the rights to collect the double portion for me. So between the two of them, we know that one of them is the b'chayr, so now they can come together with this harsha to collect the b'chayr. That's what Rava said you do in such a kind of case. So what's the Gemara saying? That the drasha of B'char v'loi safek is coming and saying that even though logically that should make sense, because we know between the two of them, one of them is a B'char, and each one has the harsha from the other that allows to collect the B'char, whether it's his, whether it's the brothers. But the pasuk is coming to say that no, even though logically this makes sense, but nevertheless, B'char v'loi safek, you could only collect a double portion of the inheritance as a b'chayr if we know for a fact that you are the b'chayr. If we don't know this for a fact and it's between you and a brother, this harsha is not going to help. You can't collect the double portion of the b'chayra.
But they both write to each other?
Yeah, they both write it to each other. Yeah, they both notify each other that they have the rights to collect the double portion of the other. No, then between them, they're both going to get it, and they'll split it between themselves, right? But the Gemara here is saying, though, that's the drasha we learn out, b'char v'loi safek, that we can't do this. That's the drasha of Rava. Okay, so now here the Gemara is going to bring that Rava himself, after he darshaned this halacha, he retracted it because of this drasha. So Rav Papa said to Rava, Rav Papa was Rava's student, so he says to Rava, how could you say that you can write the harsha, these two, that is a suffix, which is the b'char? Ravin sent to say that as follows, this shaila about a case where you have the two zecharim that were born and it's not clear which is the b'chayr, I asked all of my teachers what the halacha about this is, and they didn't answer me what the halacha would be. Beram, however, then I got the answer that Kach Omru Mishum Rab Yanai. This is what was said in the name of Rab Yanai, that when you have a case where there's a suffix, if it's Hukru, Arvu, if these two sons that were born, it was clear which one is the B'chayr, and only later in life there was a confusion, then I say, because it was a moment in time where it was clear who's the B'chayr, then they could write this harsha one to another to allow them to collect the double portion. However, loy hukru, if the case was like Rava described it, they were born lechatchila in a dark place, and it was never clear who gave birth first, then they can't write this harsha to one another to allow them to collect the double portion of the b'chayr. Okay, so this is based on the drasha we said before. So what you see from the Gemara over here is, this drasha, the Gemara says that a suffix can't collect the double portion. We don't apply that in every case of a suffix. We have this drasha, but we limit that drasha to a situation where it's a real suffix from the beginning, where it was never clear who was the b'char. But in a case where there was a moment in time where it was clear who's the b'char, we don't apply that drasha. Then we say that he was once a b'char vadai. Later in life it got mixed up. Then he could collect his double portion. So this is the way Rabbi Yanai said this halacha. So then after Rav Papa told Rava what he heard from Rav Yanai, so Rava that was teaching his students, and Rava had this the Amayra, which was an interpreter that used to give over his words to the students. So he brought the Amayra and he darshened again, and he said like this halacha, v'darash, and he said, Dvarim shamarti lechem, the halacha that I told you in the beginning, ta'asem biyadi. It was a mistake that I told you that a b'char and a suffix, you can always write a harsha one to another to collect. It's a mistake. B'ram, however, kach omri mishum Rav Yanai. This is what was said in the name of Rav Yanai. Hukru ulu b'seifnes arvu. If it was clear who was the b'char in the beginning and later it got mixed up, then kaisvan harsha zelazeh. They can write the harsha to allow them to collect the b'chara. Lo yukru, but if it was never clear who's the b'char, ain't kaisvan harsha zelazeh. They can't write the harsha to one another. Okay, sagt the Gemara weiter. Shalchu le b'nei Akra da Agma l'Shmuel. The people of Akra da Agma, they sent to ask Shmuel, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, our teacher of Shmuel, should teach us what happens in the case of Hayim Muchzakim B'zeh Shehu B'char. There was a certain person that is a chazakah, that he's a b'char. So the Rashbam's opinion in explaining this Gemara is, when it says in the Gemara the term Muchzakin, the Gemara means that this is the way everybody in the city and the street refer to this person, that he's a b'char. It's just a chazakah. But there's no edim about this. We don't have clear testimony saying that he's a b'char. So, but it's chazakah. Then v'ama aviv al acher, the father comes and points to a different brother and says b'chayru, that he no, it's someone else that's a b'char. So the father is saying against this chazakah. Is the father believed to say that there's a different son that's a b'char against this chazakah? There are Rishonim that interpret this Gemara and say that this is even in a case where there's actually edim, that this person is a b'chayr, and now the father comes and says, no, there's someone else that he's a b'chayr. But as I mentioned, the Rashbam here is medayek that there's no edim. Okay, so what's the halach here? So shalach lahu, so Shmuel answered back to say, so in such a case, it's a suffix, whether we believe the father or not, and therefore, if they now want to collect their b'chayra, kaisvin harsha zeh lezeh. So these two are going to have to write a harsha to one another to give them the ability to collect the b'char between the two of them. That's how Shmuel paskin. It's not. So the Gemara here asks on this shaila, whether the father is believed to say something like this against the chazakah, seems to be a clear machlekes Tanaim, as the Gemara is going to quote soon. So why is Shmuel saying that this is a suffix and therefore they have to write a harsha to one another? So the Gemara asks, Ma nafshach. What exactly is the opinion of Shmuel here? If he holds like the opinion of the Rabbanan, which the Gemara is going to explain in a moment, so lishlach le'Rabbanan, let him paskin and say clearly like the Rabbanan. If he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, so lishlach lehu Rabbi Yehuda, let him paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. So why is he saying that there's a suffix here? And says the Gemara, Misapkele, Rabbi Yehuda, Ik Rabbi Yehuda, Ik Rabbanan. Shmuel had a suffix whether you paskin like Rabbi Yehuda or the Rabbanan, whether the father is believed against the chazakah, and therefore Shmuel said that they're going to have to write a harsha, and between the two of them they could collect the double portion of the b'char. Okay, so now what's this machlekes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan that argued about this very case? So where is this machlekes? The Tanya we learned in the Braisa. The Torah says by the b'char yakir. It says in the lashon of the pasuk, he es ha-b'chor ben asno yakir losses leipi shnayim. You recognize him and you give him a double portion. What does this word yakir mean? What it means is yakirenu la'acherim, that you can make known, you can let know others about the status of this b'chor. That's the meaning of this pasuk. So now mikan Amar Rabbi Yehuda, based on this, Rabbi Yehuda said, Neman Adam Loimar, a father is believed to say, Zeh b'ni b'chor, that this son of mine, he is the b'chor. And that's even in a case where it's going against the chazakah, that we had an assumption that someone else is a b'char. The father is believed to say, no, this is the b'char. And then Rabbi Yehuda adds another point, just like a father is believed to say about the status of the son that he is the firstborn, a person is also believed to say about his son, that this son is puzzle. He's a pasal. If this is we're talking about it here, if it's a kayin and he married a grusha or he married a chalutza, he's believed to say about his son that he's pasal, to pasal the status of his son, that he shouldn't be a kasher kayin. So the Rashbam here says, again, two separate things.
Yeah.
Two separate things. What Rashbam says, just like he's believed to determine the status of his son that he's a b'chayr, so we see that the Torah is saying that the father has belief regarding the status of his son. So too, he's also believed to say regarding the status of the son to passel him as well, to say that he's a ben gerusha ben chalutza. That's the Rashbam's pshat, that we compare the two. Okay, now however, the Chachamim disagree, and the Chachamim say, no, we don't learn out from this from Yakir. A father is not believed against the Chazakah to say about the status of the son that he's a Bechor. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Yitzchak asks Rav, how do we explain that extra word of Yakir according to the Chachamim? Bishleim Rabbi Yehuda, it's understood according to Rabbi Yehuda, Haina the Chsiv Yakir. The chiddush of the word Yakir is that the father can let us know who's the Bechor even against the Chazakah. But Elo Rabbanon, however, according to the Rabbanon, Yakir Lomali, what's this pasuk of Yakir coming to teach me? Answers the Gemara, B'tzareh Chekeda. It's coming to tell me in a case where we don't know. There's no Chazakah, where there's a child, there's a person, we don't know if he's a Bechor or not. And the father is the one that's letting us know who's the Bechor. We have a bunch of sons there, and we don't have a chazakah one way or another. We don't know who it is. And the father is believed to say, Yakir, that this is the Bechor. But not in a case where it's going against the chazakah that we already had before. That's what the Yakir is coming to say according to the Chachamim. But the Gemara asks on this, Lamai Hilchasa, what's the halacha here that you're saying that we need the belief, we have to have a special chiddush that the pasuk says that the father is believed to say that this is my son the Bechor. Lemeisv'loi pi shnayim. Are we trusting the father to say that this is a Bechor in order to now know that this Bechor gets the double portion? We don't need a special pasuk to teach that to me. Lo yehei elo acher, even if it would just be any person. Ilu boy lemeisv'loi b'matane milo yavlei. If the father would want to give a gift, extra portion, or to give money to someone, would the father not have the ability to give money to any individual that he wants? What the Gemara is saying over here is, in a case where it's not going against any chazakah, there's no reason why not to believe the father. What are we believing the father for? That he should get a double portion? The father has the ability to give that as a gift to this child, even without saying that he's a Bechor. So if you can give it to him, why would he lie and come and say that this is a Bechor? This is basically the concept of migu. Since he could have went and given him as a gift this extra portion, this extra money anyways, he should be believed to say that he's a Bechor. It's actually even better than a migu, because a migu is usually in the Gemara when you say one claim and then you say a better claim, that you would be more believed. Over here, it's money that he has in his pocket, or it's his possessions. He can just go ahead and give it to whoever he wants. So why should he not be believed to say that this child is a Bechor? Now, this is a question specifically on the Chachamim that are darshaning this way. But according to the Rabbi Yehuda, that says that a father is believed even in a case where there's a chazakah that someone else is a Bechor, and the father is saying something against the chazakah, and that we understand why we need the pasuk of Yakir, because we're believing the father. True, the father has a migu, but we're believing the father against the chazakah. That's a chiddush, that we believe him against the chazakah. But the shaila over here is, if we're saying that the father is believed in a case where we have no prior knowledge, there's no chazakah at all, why should we not believe the father to say that this child is the Bechor? Answers the Gemara, Lo tzriche b'nechasim shenaflu lo la'acha mikan. The case here is, we need this pasuk of Yakir according to Chachamim regarding a case where there's money, there's possessions that the father does not have now yet. It comes to him later on. So you can't say that he has a migu, that he could give him this money as a gift. It's not in his possession to give yet. It's a davar shalei bala olam. So over here, since he doesn't have the migu, we need a pasuk to say that when we don't know who the Bechor is, that the father is believed to identify who the Bechor is. So asks the Gemara, and this answer doesn't fit, because Rab Meir, according to Rab Meir's opinion, that says that a person could be makna something even before it exists here in the world. We have this in the Gemara in many places. The Gemara says, according to Rab Meir, for example, a person says, "I'll marry you when I become a ger." It's a davar shalei bala olam. He's not even a ger yet. Then that kedushin will take effect. There's other examples as well. We learned and before here also as well that Rab Meir holds a davar shalei bala olam you could sell. Right, so the Gemara here is assuming that the Chachamim in this Braisa is Rab Meir, because it said that you have here the Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Usually the one that argued with Rabbi Yehuda was Rab Meir. So if this Braisa here is Rab Meir that's arguing with Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yehuda says that you could be makna something that's not here yet. So if so, the question that we had before comes back, why do you need the pasuk of Yakir to say that the father is believed to identify the Bechor if he has a migu? He anyways could have just given the extra portion to this person. And even if it's money that he gets later, he can say now that whatever I get later will be yours. Answers the Gemara, no, there still is a case where the father cannot give that extra portion. When is that? So again, the question is, Yakir Lomali, why do I need this extra pasuk Yakir? Answers the Gemara, B'nechasim shenaflu lo kishul geisis. If there's money that the father gets when he's a geisis, when he's mamish about to pass away, so this person that's a geisis, whatever money he gets at that point is part of the Yerusha. He's still alive. He's still technically alive. But on the other hand, though, a geisis does not have the ability to be makna, to give anything to anybody. At that stage, when a person is mamish, he can't communicate, he can't talk, he can't move, he can't do anything, he can't give anything. So you can't say that this money that he gets at that point that he's a geisis, that he would be able to give it to this person that he's now identifying as a b'chair. So therefore, the pasuk here, Yakir, according to the Chachamim, is coming and telling me that even this money that comes to him later at the time of a geisis, he's able to say that this child is a b'chair and he's going to get the double portion from that, even though this is money that he could not be makna to him. He did not have this migu that he was able to give to him. That's the drasha according to the Chachamim, or the Gemara now says, which is Rab Meir. Okay, so this is the machlokes here between the Rab Yehuda and the Chachamim, and Shmuel, as the Gemara said before, had a suffix about this, whether the father has the ability to identify a b'chair against the chazakah that we had prior to him identifying one person. And so therefore Shmuel had a suffix, so he said that they're going to have to write a harsha one to another. Tan Rabbanan, and a brayso we learned, what's if there is a son, there's a person that we have a chazakah that is a b'chair. The father comes and says on someone else that he's a b'chair. So again, the same point here. The father is coming identifying someone else against this chazakeh that there's another son that's the b'chair. So the Brisa says Neman, he's believed. Now the second case of the Brisa is there's one son that we have a chazakeh that he's not the firstborn. The father comes and says against the chazakeh that he is a b'chair. So here the seif of the Brisa says the father is not believed to say what the status of this son is against the chazakeh. So the Gemara here says Reisha Rabbi Yehuda. The Reisha is saying the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that we had in the previous Brisa, that the father is believed to identify his son against the prior chazakeh. And the Seifa Rabbanon, the Seifa of this Brisa is going according to the Rabbanon or Rab Meir, that the father is not believed to identify the status of the son against a chazakeh. The Gemara is not saying this is a question, the Gemara is saying this is a matter of fact, that this Brisa is two different opinions here. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Amar, a person comes and says regarding a certain individual, Benihu, this is my son. And then v'chazav Amar Avdihu. Then he switches, then he says, no, it's not my son. This is my slave, my Eved Kanani. Einay Neman. He's not believed to switch from what he said in the beginning. Once he says that this is his son, he can't come and change and now say that this is his Eved. According to the Rashbam, this is talking about whether the person is changing this Toich Kedei Dibur or Acha Kedei Dibur. Usually the klal is a person can change whatever he says as long as it's Toich Kedei Dibur in a very short period of time. But the Rashbam says that in this case, we have this pasuk of Yakir that says that a father has the ability to testify about the status of the son, but after he says it, he can't come and change that, even Toich Kedei Dibur. That's Rashbam's opinion. The Tur, other Rishonim disagree and say that no, that this Gemara is talking about Acha Kedei Dibur, but Toich Kedei Dibur, he can still change what he says. But what's if the case is the reverse? Says the Rabbi Yochanan, if where am I over here? Avdihu. First he comes and says that this is my slave, and then v'chazav v'amar benihu. Afterwards he comes and says that this is my son. Neman. Then he is believed to change what he said in the beginning. What's the reason? Because the mishamishli ka'avda ka'amar. Because when he said in the beginning that it's my slave, all he meant to say is that my son is serving me like a slave. Meaning that I don't see how my son is serving me with the love, the way a son should serve a father. He's serving me like a slave, and therefore I refer to him as a slave. But later on he comes and says that he's his son. It's not a contradiction to what he said before. He's explaining what he said before. He was saying before that he's serving me like a slave, but really it's my son. But on the other hand, though, what Rabbi Yochanan said in the beginning, you can't say the same svara in the reverse, that if a person first comes and says that this is my son, and later on he comes and says that it's my slave, that really it was a slave, and he only referred to him as a son in the beginning because he loved him so much like a son. That you don't say. Because as much as a person loves his slave that is serving him, he's never going to refer to him as my son. So the fact that he said in the beginning that this is my son, we know that he meant to say that it's his son. So therefore you can't change that later and say that it's a slave. But the other way around, that is possible, that a person would refer to his son as a slave because he's serving him like a slave, and then therefore when he says later that he's a son, we consider that just to be a piddush. He's explaining what he said before. Now, v'chilufei, it will be the opposite than what we just said here. Abeis hameches, a person that is going by a toll booth or by places where the taxes are collected. So in those times, the person had to pay the taxes for the people that were with him, and that's only for a slave that he had with him. He had to pay extra taxes for this. But for his family members, for a son, he didn't have to pay taxes for this. So therefore, in such a case, if the person is traveling, let's say, for example, one example, and he's coming by a toll booth where he has to pay, and he says, Binihu, this is my son. And then he switches later on and he says, no, this is really my slave. Neman, so he'll be believed, because we say the only reason we refer to him as a son in the beginning is because he wanted to say that he's a family member to avoid paying taxes. And later on, he comes and says the truth that this is really a slave. But if he said Oma Avdihu when he's by the toll, he says that this is my slave, which means that he has to pay tax for him. And then V'chazav Oma Biniu, and then later on he comes and says that it's a son, Ein Eman. He's not going to be believed. Why would he say first that he's a slave in order to obligate himself to pay taxes if it really was a son of his? So therefore we know that that's true what he said in the beginning, and therefore you can't change from what he said in the beginning. The Gemara asks on what Rabbi Yechanan said before regarding the case where a person comes and says that this is my Eved, and then he later says that it's my son. So Rabbi Yechanan said that in such a case he is believed. So the Gemara asks from what it says in the Braisa, if you have someone that's serving a person like his son, and the father, this person, he comes and says, yeah, this is my son. And then later on he comes and says, no, this is just my slave. He's not believed to switch from what he said in the beginning. So this is exactly like the first statement that Rabbi Yechanan said, that once you refer to someone as a son, then later on you can't switch and say that he's an Eved. And that's over here in this case as well, even though he's serving him like a son, meaning that this is someone that's serving him with a lot of love, like a son. Even in this case, you can't say that it was an Eved and he was just referring to him like a son because if he's serving him so dedicated like a son, he's still not believed. A person would not refer to his Eved as a son. That's exactly like the first statement of Rabbi Yechanan. However, here though, this is not like Rabbi Yechanan. If this is someone that's serving him like a slave, not with that love of his son, he's serving him just like a slave. And then above Va'ama Avdiyu, and this person comes and says that this is my Eved, V'chaza Va'ama Benihu, and then he comes afterwards and says that no, this is my son. He will not be believed. So this is a contradiction of what Rabbi Yechanan said. Rabbi Yechanan said that when you say regarding someone that first that he's my Eved and then later on he's my son, Rabbi Yechanan said that you are believed. And the only reason he said in the beginning that he's an Eved is because he's serving like an Eved. And over here in this Braisa, it's speaking about a case where you have this person that's Takeh, serving him like an Eved, not with the proper dedication of a son. And still the Braisa says that he's not believed to change and say, after he said that he's an Eved, he's not believed to say that it's his son. Rav Nachman Yitzchak explains that the Braisa is speaking about a case, Hasam, the Korele, Avda Meitzer Meir. Over there, the case was that he referred to this person not just as an Eved. He referred to him as an Eved, which is a fence or a gate of 100. And therefore that is very clear that he's identifying him as a slave and not a son. And Gemara explains this expression. What does this mean? My Meitzer Meir. What does it mean? A slave that's a gate of 100. Metzer Avda Kuf Zuzi. This is an Eved that's worth 100 zuz, meaning that he's a very valuable Eved, he does very good work, and he's worth 100 zuz. So in a case where he l'chatchila identified him with such a clear expression of being an Eved with this value, then the Braisa is saying that he can't switch later on to say that, no, this is my son. But in the case that Rabbi Yechanan spoke about, he said he's an Eved, and that means that he's serving me like an Eved. There he is believed to say later on that he is a son.